Jets fans, what's happening? It's your friend Dom C from GreenBean Jetsfan here with another installment of the Project Prospect podcast. Today's special because the draft is over, right? You know, we did all this preparation over the past 2, 3, 6, sometimes even 9, 10 months to get to this culmination of what is 3 days. And you know, those 3 days have come and passed. And as Jets fans, there's tons of highs, there's tons of lows. We all know how draft day goes, but we're through it, right? And here we go. We got a list of characters to join our New York Jets for 2023. Some of the names we knew, maybe we weren't expecting. Some of the names we were really stoked to see, and some of them are head scratchers. But I digress. We're going to bring on a special guest today to talk through our entire 2023 draft class. Someone who I've grown to like very much, you know, personally and professionally. I follow all the stuff that he does. He's the editor at JetNation.com. Glenn Naughton. Let me bring Glenn on.
Happy to be here. You get me now?
I got you now, though. That's
perfect. I think my audio was a little loose. I'm doing good though, man. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to join you.
Oh, man. So those who don't know Glenn, like I said, he's the editor of JetNation.com. He's also the host of JetNation Radio, which is on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, or on the JetNation.com on Thursdays at 6:30. Am I correct, Glenn?
Correct.
Good. So Glenn, happy post-draft. You know, I know, like you're constantly on the grind with these prospects, and you know, you and I talk back and forth about a bunch of them. You know, between Dylan and a whole bunch of guys. So you know, for me, it's kind of like I can breathe a little bit, but it's also like, you know, I'm a little bit like sad that it's over. You know, like I feel like I put all this work into something in trying to learn and educate myself and really get a good, keen eye and break these prospects down, all for it in 3 days to just be done. So, you know, how are you feeling today post draft?
You know, relieved, you know, just like same as you said, like exhale a little bit.
Yeah.
But I gotta be honest, I'm already thinking in my head, because as I, you know, what I started doing a year or so ago, was as I'm watching these prospects and taking notes on them, I try to pull highlights, clips of each guy as I'm watching to get an idea like who does what well, and to be able to share some of those on JetNation.com and embed them in articles when I, you know, once the draft is over. And it's I'm between two worlds. Like, I have to clean up my process because I end up seeing guys who aren't draft eligible, but they're really good. So I'm taking notes and highlights on them. But the good side is now this draft is over. I haven't gone through the pile yet, but I've probably got a couple hundred guys who are in next year's draft who I've already got highlights of that are ready to go. So sort of start a compilation on them. And it's like, I thought to myself today, I'm like, do I take a day off or do I go right back into watching last year's games to pull last year? And I thought I'm going to relax for 2 or 3 days, and then get right back into it. Because it's a fun process, man. If you're a fan of the game, and lucky enough, you know, I'm lucky enough that I've got the time to do it. So I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I told myself a week. I wouldn't cut or break down or open up any college all 22 film for a week to just kind of get my bearings under me and get everything I need to around in place before I delve back into it. So yeah, I'm with you, man. Once, you know, kind of like, you know, once a pickle, always a pickle. Like, you know, once you get yourself knee deep in this process of breaking down and studying and looking at these prospects at a much deeper level, it's hard to not do it. At least that's my experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as a whole, Glenn, you know, we got 7 new guys, you know, that we drafted on top of the undrafted free agents that we brought in. It seems like we got about 24 of those guys, but
a lot of UDFAs, which I like.
Yeah.
Bring those guys in, 3 or 4 of them stick. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So the draft class as a whole, and I'm not looking for a letter grade or this or that. Like, you know, just tell me your initial, you know, kind of afterthoughts now that all the dust settled and you know who, you know, Joe Douglas and Saleh and the crew drafted.
Well, I'm really of two minds on this.
Okay.
I don't dislike the players. I like a lot of the guys they got. I was a big Izzy Abanikanda guy. McDonald, a lot of people were critical of that pick. I get what they're thinking there. You got to play these elite quarterbacks. You want to be able to close games out. Let's get another guy with fresh legs coming off the edge. Makes sense to me. Even if he doesn't play a ton of snaps, he'll have the opportunity to make a ton of key plays.
Mhm.
So I don't have a problem with that. Listen, Joe Tippmann was my number one center. Carter Warren, I thought, was a very high-end pass blocker who, might have to work on his run blocking. But, when you're talking third, fourth, fifth round, you're not finding perfect players in round one. So
Especially this draft.
Exactly. So I'm not knocking the players per se. I was surprised by the approach. My thought process coming into this, especially once the deal for Aaron Rodgers was official,
Mhm.
and I said this to Dylan Terman, my co-host. I said, I'm really curious to see what this does to the Jets' approach. Like, do they look at this? Because in my mind, and apparently I'm surprisingly, and to each his own, but there seem to be a fair number of people who disagree with me on this. My opinion is that by giving up premium assets for a year or two, let's say 2 years, I was sort of hell-bent on when you have to plan on 1 year for Aaron Rodgers, but it appears he's going to do at least 2 now, which is great. But if you trade premium assets for a 2-year rental on a guy who's going to, cost what he's going to cost in picks and money, that to me is a proclamation that we are making a run at the Super Bowl now. We have just opened the window by acquiring the best quarterback in the history of the team, that this year and next, while he is here, we are going to try to win a Super Bowl, which is great. To me, that formula means you draft guys who you believe will be high volume guys right out of the gate. Now, look, I'm not saying why didn't they draft a starter in the 7th round? Like that's ridiculous. But it's those early picks. It's like I said, I don't mind McDonald. I like that pick from a talent perspective, but from a production perspective, I expected that to be either one of the tackles, which it wasn't, which is fine. They were gone. Or Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is a guy that even if he's in the slot, even if he plays 50, 60% of the snaps, he's going to be playing. He's going to be the guy you have on the field on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, who can make a play. And he plays to Aaron Rodgers' strengths. You watch him on film, you look at the agility drills from the combine. We know he's a guy who can get open in a hurry off the line of scrimmage, which is where Aaron Rodgers absolutely thrives. Those quick, 1-2 step drops, get the ball out, hit the receiver. So I thought that would have been more of a win now move. And to me, this needs to be a win now team. But they drafted as if they're like this is a 5 or 6 year plan, which is, I guess if that's the approach you want to take, that's fine. Tippmann, I love Joe Tippmann. A few people gave me a hard time because I said he was my center one. And I'm not saying JMS can't play. I like Tippmann more. I like the way he absolutely obliterates defenders on tosses and sweeps when he pulls to the outside. He's going to open so much for this running game. But I say all the time, coaches lie, right? And maybe Robert Saleh is, telling a little fib here, but I don't think he's lying when he says that this is going to be a legitimate competition between Tippmann and Connor McGovern. Now, I like McGovern. I would love to see Tippmann start, but in my mind, there is a path. It's not beyond the realm of possibility to say the Jets' 2nd and 3rd picks could really not see the field this year. And to me, that doesn't spell small 2-year window win now. That's like, hey, this is the developmental long-term plan, which if that's a plan, it's fine. It just surprised me. I thought, well, you got Rodgers now, so you got to go all in right now. Yeah. And they didn't. And so like I said, I had some people like, you hate the team. Why are you saying this draft is not awesome and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's 2 different looking at it. Like, I like the talent. I'm surprised by the lack of guys who will contribute on. But listen, I'm guessing like everybody else, right? Maybe they're looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba and thinking he's not very good. Maybe they don't like him. I do. We talked about this pre-show. I mentioned it on my show the other day. I talked about it with some other podcasters. Like, the board that you have in your bedroom hanging over your coffee table may not match the Jets board. Like, they're drafting the guys they like. And it surprised me. But listen, I would love nothing more than to be wrong and to have Carter Warren win the starting job and to have Joe Tippmann win the starting. I would be ecstatic. All I'm saying is that the way they approached it leaves a possibility that won't happen. And their top premium guys could be on the bench at the start of a 2-year window.
Yeah. See, and this is what and what you feel and how you just explained that. That is the same sentiment that I'm hearing from some people that I talk to and who I'm back and forth with in social media, so on and so forth. But here's my kind of twist to that. You said something interesting, and I'm just going to play off your words. It's nothing,
Yeah, go ahead.
bad. You said, you hope Carter Warren can win the starting job. I went into this, and again, this is just how I felt. Even if it was Broderick Jones, or Skoronski, or whomever it was, tackle, one of those guys fell to us for 15. Like I still went into this thinking Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton, if they're both healthy, they're going to be our starters. I didn't see that clear path to a starting job for a Broderick Jones at 15. I just didn't, and that's my assessment of the player. I think the long-term upside was there for him. So to that same point, like JSN, I love the player. I also had JSN as my number one receiver on the board, but I don't know where that, unless you tell me, okay, if we're going to take JSN, we're definitely moving Corey Davis for a day 3 pick or a late day 3 pick or something like that. Get rid of that. Then it kind of makes sense, but I just don't see where the natural fit or playing time comes in. So to your point, even if we went JSN or a tackle at 15, I think that we're still in that same situation, right?
I see what you're saying. I think it depends on the tackle. Broderick Jones, talented guy, high ceiling, was the guy I wanted least, because I agree with you. I don't think he's ready to go now. However,
he was my fourth as well.
Yeah, when there was talk of, when there was speculation that because of the arm length, Skoronski could fall, I think Skoronski can play tackle. And if Skoronski, he was kind of the guy I had my eye on, because I'm like, Paris Johnson probably isn't going to fall if Skoronski does. And but again, JSN, I was JSN all the way. But kind of understanding the Jets probably want the tackle here, I think if it was Skoronski, they would give him every chance to beat out Dwayne Brown, and he probably could have. Or, as we said, does Mekhi Becton stay healthy? I'm still a big believer in Mekhi Becton. I think he's an absolute monster. I think his injuries were, it was a fluke, but it happens. But, coming out of Louisville, there's no reason to believe there's an injury history there or a trend where he's constantly on the shelf. Correct. So I'm expecting him to be back this year and healthy, and if he is, he's 100% starting. Dwayne Brown is the X factor. I think that given the age, and he was dinged up a little bit last year with the shoulder, but I think there was a more of a path to a first rounder unseating him. Whereas I think a third rounder, it's there, as much as teams don't like to admit it, like salary comes into this, draft status comes into this.
$11 million swing tackles.
$11 million. Yeah, you might bench an $11 million guy for number 15 pick overall, but you're not benching him for a third rounder, unless he's an utter disaster, of course.
Sure.
But and a lot of it too, by my own admission, was the fact that the more I watched JSN, the more I thought this guy helps Aaron Rodgers right away. Yeah. In a way, look, people, everyone says, oh, well, you're going to get Aaron Rodgers killed without taking a tackle. First of all, as we said, they've got tackles now. Durability is a concern. I understand that. But there's still some free agents out there, which we could talk about if you like. But my thought process was, if you watch Aaron Rodgers at his best, what he does is get the ball out under 2 seconds consistently when receivers are getting open off the line. That's what JSN brings. That's what Garrett Wilson brings. So you got a couple of guys who make his life easier, and you're not going to need Anthony Munoz at tackle. Like you would have been okay with decent tackle play, and the need for that, you have to use, 13 at the time or 15 on a tackle. I understand doing it, but I don't think it would have been as urgent of a need, because again, I don't think Brown and Becton and any combination of, guys like, Freeland, Bergeron, as another guy I thought could have lined up at tackle. Obviously others disagree. And even Warren to an extent, right? Because the fact his strength is pass blocking. You probably could get by with him if you've got a Garrett Wilson and a JSN lining up. But the Jets obviously disagreed. So that's my whole point is, I don't dislike the players. I'm just surprised by the approach.
Gotcha. I understand. And listen, you're not alone. You're not alone. Like I said, I think the entire, Jets community, when we're on the clock, first off was either sad because they knew we missed out on the top 4 tackles, and was very anxious because no one really had a dead set. If they're gone, what's going to happen. You know, I
Right.
think the field, you know, if you polled all of Jets fans, it was kind of split. You know, half of them were say JSN, the other half would say guys like Cansey or whomever. You know,
Kansas another one. You know, I thought, do they line him up next to? I mean, because think about, you know, we talked about that a few times on Twitter before the draft with several people. Like Cansey's a guy who first jumped out at me last year. I talked to Dylan Terman about that pit front seven a few times. A lot of guys up there that I liked. And I thought Cansey next to Quinnen Williams, like that's going to make life on quarterbacks miserable. That the amount of pressure you're going to be able to generate up the middle could help take this defense to the next level. So Cansey was another option that we discussed pre-draft, and you know would have been right up there to me. With JSN would have been my preferred, but Cansey absolutely would have been happy with that too. So there were multiple avenues.
Yeah, I expected that when the fourth tackle, when Broderick Jones, when Pittsburgh jumped up, that's who I expected the Jets pick to be. That, like, if I was betting right at that time, for some reason I just didn't buy the smoke that the Jets had been doing a lot of homework on JSN and they were in on it, you know, because the one thing I've learned is that when you hear a lot of those rumors about the Jets come about, there's no substance to them. You know, JD and his crew are lock. You know,
they really are.
They run a tight ship there.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen the rumors that Jahmyr Gibbs was their guy at 15 if he was on the board.
Yes.
And that came from a couple of places, one or two that I think are credible. And it makes sense if you look at the fact that Aaron Rodgers, and this is why I said after day one, I said, keep an aim on Izzy Abanikanda. I love the Abanikanda. I raved about him all throughout the season. And it wasn't just that he was a personal favorite. I thought there's not another Jahmyr Gibbs in this class, but the closest thing to a Jahmyr Gibbs is Izzy Abanikanda, that guy who's going to break off that 70-yard touchdown run. And this team, if you look at Aaron Rodgers again, and throughout the last few years, the completion, the number of passes he completes to running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs and Breece Hall would have been a dream scenario that none of us anticipated. Dylan and I talked about, like, you know, do you take Jahmyr Gibbs at 42? Like, imagining he might be there. Turns out not even close. But as we pondered that, we thought, you know what? Running back may not be a need, but Jesus, if you can add Jahmyr Gibbs to this roster. So the Jets were looking at that. And I think that's why they went Abanikanda. But but to your point, like, nobody talked about Jahmyr Gibbs to the Jets. Nobody.
Yeah.
And it the more you think about it, it sounds, you see the logic, and I don't think that the rumors of that being a possibility are all that, you know, outlandish.
Correct. No, listen, I've heard that a couple places. One of them, whom I take is a very credible source. I mean, it came out after the fact, but again, can't draft someone who's already been drafted, so that was a wash. You know, so once the tackles were off and Jahmyr Gibbs, for that matter, was off as well, you know, I was dead set on, not dead set, I wasn't rooting one way or another, but I would have put my bet and money on Cansey, and I would have been completely content with it, you know? Yeah. But the Jets shifted. So let's get into these picks, and let's talk about Will McDonald. Now, like you said, I love the player. I really do. I love the player. I love the skill set that he brings. And I think most Jets fans were just kind of in shock because
I was blown away.
As everyone goes through their, you know, like their research, and the research being, you know, the mock draft that you do, you know, when you're on the toilet, so on and so forth, you know, no one ever talked about edge at 15. No. It just wasn't an option. So no one really, you know, outside of the diehards who were, you know, knee deep in this, no one really did a lot of homework on these top end edges, because they just thought, yeah, you know, we could probably take an edge. And I talked about it a lot. I said that edge was a real sneaky need that you have, considering that Carl Lawson, you know, the rumors that he was going to be here or who he could be traded. Even regardless, he's in his walk year. Bryce Huff's in his walk year, you know. So I said that if I know the Jets and Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich do what they want to do and create chaos from the front four, you're going to have to keep feeding this pipeline. So I could see an edge, and I can see an edge being taken every single draft. So I talked about that. I didn't expect one at 15. Talk to me about Will McDonald.
Real quick, though, to piggyback on that, because we were in the same situation. I said to Dylan Terman a week or two before the draft, I said, I said, this is a bad job by us, Dylan. I said, we haven't talked about edge enough. I said, the more I think about, now, again, same as you, I didn't think 15. But I started looking at, when they had 42 and 43, like looking at that range. I'm like, this is a Robert Saleh team. They want to get to the quarterback. They want to rotate guys. So I was looking at those later, second round and beyond. Didn't think it would be a first round thing. But listen, so Will McDonald, right? The explosion, fantastic. That you see the RAS score, the attributes through the roof. Very active hands, able to keep blockers off of him, and the length is phenomenal. You see some of these plays he makes where he gets the corner. He doesn't even have to get, he kind of gains a step by having that length that he doesn't need to get, where he's able to reach over, pull the quarterback down without getting past the tackle. So he brings a lot to the table. He brings that as they say, a few people have said he might be the most twitched up guy in this class. Yeah. And when you have those attributes and you can get a guy in that spot, I think a lot of people are right. And I think part of it too, and I said this, and I'm sure others have said it, I think it was that lack of production this year where he got moved around a little bit that kind of hurt his stock. If he had 10 plus sacks each of the 2 previous seasons. If he had 10 plus sacks again this year, nobody would be questioning this pick. Everybody would be like, how did you get a guy who had 33 sacks in the last 3 years, right? But because he had that dip, I see people saying to me on Twitter, "Oh, great, we took a guy who had 5 sacks last year." Like, man, get out of the box score. And look at what guy did. Look at what this guy did on the field. He's absolutely has the ability to be a high-end rusher. I loved it on this D line with the depth they have. If you have him out there, I mean, again, I know they rotate and the personnel groupings will differ, but you get him on the field in a big spot with Lawson on one side and Quinnen Williams and JFM in the middle. Who are you going to double? How many double teams will this guy see as a rookie? He might not see one. And he's got the ability to beat people. So I love the pick from that perspective. And that's why even before I questioned the wisdom of the whole draft, after night 1, I'm on Twitter and the forums at JetNation, going back and forth with people who were like, this is a reach. This is a panic pick. They didn't know what to do. I'm like, I think they know what they're doing. I think they want to close out games. I think they're envisioning Patrick Mahomes or whoever and name the AFC stud quarterback. They're envisioning these guys sitting back in the 2-minute drill in the fourth quarter, having too much time to throw the ball and wanting to change that.
Yeah. And isn't it so apropos that Jets fans are, I'll use the word pissed off. I wouldn't say that. Stunned at first. Oh, we drafted an edge. We don't need any edges. For 20 years, we've been saying, if we could only get an edge since Abraham, right?
I had that same thought. Like, we're now at the point where we're saying, we have too many edges. We have Michael Clemens and Huff. Why are we getting another edge? Like, listen, they say it all. You can't have enough corners, can't have enough edge guys, right? You always need them.
Yeah. Listen, and I was just going to say, if you're, premium positions, just like you said, left tackles, edges, quarterbacks, wide receivers, you can't have too many of them. Right. Yeah. These are the cornerstones of where good teams, good offenses, good defenses are built around. And like I said, I don't think after all the dust settled and the initial shock that Will McDonald was the pick and everyone kind of tempered and settled and said, okay, let me do this and let me do that. Like I said, I watched a bunch of Iowa State prior to the draft. Yeah. And, they ran that weird 3-3-5, defense. It was very awkward. And everyone knows at this point, especially after, seeing the Robert Saleh call, he was misplaced. He was playing inside. We're
going to get you out of that 4-eye and put you
we're going to put you in 4-eye and we're going to put you in the 9. So, and that's where the guy, really, really wreaks havoc.
Excels,
So I love the pick, now, considering, listen, again, would I have picked differently? I would have, I probably would have leaned towards Kalijah Kancey, because I just think that, I like that combination of having those 2 just dominant penetrators in the middle, even if they, even if you sub in, or rotate the 2 of them at the 3 tech and have another body at the 1. But I would have went that way. But I'm not going to, in hindsight, I'm not going to be too upset with Will McDonald. I think he's got traits that nobody else on this edge team has.
That's the thing. He could be the best of the bunch.
That's right.
I've had people say to me, we just took Clemens and JJ. I'm like, yeah, but he's better. Like, you can add players who are better than the ones you have. And all it does is move guys down 1 notch on the depth chart, and he slides in. And there again, what you said a couple minutes ago, I had that thought the other day. I'm like, people, like, in the year 2023, Jets fans are complaining that we have too many edge rushers. Like, I never thought I'd see the day. And I imagine part of it is them saying, look, as we said, they love to rotate their guys. They probably they want to get to a point where they don't feel like when Lawson comes off, there's a huge drop off. Like they want sustained quality pressure, and by doing that, that's what they hope this does.
Yeah. Listen, I ideally right now, I mean, in base sets, right? You're going to have Carl Lawson on the weak side in the wide 9. You're going to have JFM probably on the outside, unless they start cooking him inside. I know there's some of those truthers, the JFM inside truthers, but for right now on depth charts, I'm assuming you're going to see JFM, on the strong side, right? And then you have Jermaine Johnson and you have Will McDonald, as rotational thing in, and you still have your passer specialist and Bryce Huff that can come in the field, and Michael Clemens, which can cause havoc on either side. Like, you have a very, very strong, especially for a team and a head coach that wants to get at the quarterback. Using this front four, like you're pretty deep there with the heavy rotation. Like, I think as the dust settles, people are going to realize that this is a really good pick. It might not have been the pick you wanted, or the pick that I wanted, or the pick that someone, or Mel Kiper. Actually, I shouldn't say that, because Mel Kiper actually did predict Will McDonald. Did
he really?
He did.
Okay, I had the NFL.com feed on, so I didn't know what Kiper said.
Will McDonald was projected by Mel Kiper in his final mock and on the air. So,
wow.
I'll say whomever, prognosticator X.
Right.
It might have not been their pick, but as you see it, like, I get it. He's got the traits, and you said something that was very, very telling to a Joe Douglas draft class, especially this one. Long, strong, and fast, right? Yeah. These are all those are the entire class. Even if if you look at the undrafted free agents, some of them, as you get into them, they all excel in those specific things. They might be super strong, they might be super long, they have those traits that he's obviously targeting for one reason or another. So listen, it's a rotational defense, a rotational defensive line. They've been open with that for the past 2 years. They want to keep guys fresh. You have to, gun to your head, Glenn. What do you what's the percentage of plays that you think Will McDonald sees year one? Everything barring everyone's healthy and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's so tough. I mean, if JJ takes that step that we expect, they're going to want to get him more reps. I mean, they lost off the top of my head. They lost Vinny Curry. They haven't lost anyone that was a 300 or 400 or 500 snap guy. They lost some interior guys, but the thing is, it's important to remember, and this is part of what I've talked about and why the pick made sense. They're expecting leads this season, so they're expecting a lot more pass rush opportunities.
That's right.
Nothing worse than having a bunch of pass rushers on your roster, but you're always playing from behind, and teams are just running the ball down your throat because you have a bunch of 250-pound guys on the edge.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I would say 20 to 25%. Like, I don't know how. With JJ, with Lawson, with him, with Huff, with Clemens, everyone's got to get some reps. That's why I've said I think it's not going to be so much the number of reps, but the timing of it. Like, is he going to be the guy that's on the field late in the game, fourth quarter? Need to get that stop. And what it reminded me of when I thought about it, I should actually go look at the game logs and try to remember specifically. I remember one was against the Patriots. But if you think back, many years, for those of us who go back far enough, you think about when they drafted John Abraham. And he didn't really see the field a whole lot early on. And then all of a sudden, in a span of, and I'm going off memory, so I could be a little bit off here, but in a short time frame, he had like 2 game-ending sacks, or fourth quarter final drive sacks. And it was like, oh, here's this kid they drafted out of, what was it, South Carolina or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was when he kind of made a name for himself and put himself on the map. And that was the vision I had with McDonald. Like, I think he's a guy that, even if he doesn't get a ton of reps, if he's not playing 30, 40% like other guys, is he going to be, and again, I say 25 conservatively, because if he plays well enough, that number will be a little bit higher. But I think at the very least, he'll play 25% of the snaps, and he'll be a guy that make a couple plays in the fourth quarter, kid, and you'll get more, and they'll let you eat. But if guys are staying fresh and Rodgers is playing to his potential, my hope is that they're winning some of these games by big enough margins that they can, they won't a sack in the fourth quarter won't be the end of the world. They can, they can breathe easy and, with a multi-score lead with a couple minutes left, and that's the goal.
Yeah, I agree. And listen, I think 20 to 25 is conservative. I could see a little bit more, depending on how everything goes. And listen, I'm going to knock on wood right now because, if everything's healthy and he only sees 20 to 25 percent, and we're still winning games, and so be it. And
that's the thing. Like, I think that's probably sort of you're early on. Like I said, if he plays well, if he's getting the job done down, sort of look at the second half, that's when you see like an uptick. Like, all right, this guy's doing well. He's doing everything we're asking him to. And then maybe you see 30, 35% and an uptick from that point on. But the bottom line is he's going to get, I think he's going to get on the field in big spots. And if he makes plays, the playing time will come. But it's nice to be deep at edge.
Absolutely. And I say this I shouldn't say it with utter confidence, but with a lot of confidence. I don't think McDonald would have been on the board at 43. I think he was coming.
No,
he was coming off the board before 43. So to everyone's point is 15 was too high. Listen, if he's the guy on the board and that he's not going to reach you at the next pick, you go get your guy, and at least it seemed from our end, from our angle, from what they let us in, and from what they talked about. Joe Douglas was trying to work the phone. He was, moving in. He was trying to move and shake a little bit to move down in that first round. There was two problems. One, he didn't get anything that he thought worthwhile. Two, there was no one really to come up for, right? I thought that maybe there was somebody that was going to want to come up for Will Levis.
That was my pre-draft. I thought I already had in my head. I was like, maybe Tampa wants to trade up. For
Levis exactly.
Falls,
Yeah.
Obviously didn't happen.
No, they love Baker, I guess.
I guess so.
That's another story. So I don't think that he was going to reach 43. And if he's your highest player on the board and you can't work your way around, you can't work your way down. I got no problem with the pick.
That's the thing. Without knowing what they were offered, right? We can say all the time, trade down. What if somebody was offering him a 5 to move down 18 spots? Like you're not doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you might have a team on the other line who realizes, and and I had this thought before the draft, because I'm one of those people, banging the drum for trade down. And then I think to myself, well, if the team on the other line realizes, listen, the Jets only have 5 picks, they're desperate for more, we can try to fleece them on something. Let's offer them, let's try to move up, and we'll offer them, and even the deal they made, to move down and pick up a couple of picks. If you look at the draft value chart, they did get fleeced on that, but it's so late in the draft at that point, you can kind of live with it. It's those early picks that are premiums where, you're not going to mess around with that.
Yeah. So there were 2 guys on the board, which I thought made sense for teams, in real life, teams would come up for. One was Will Levis. Obviously, that didn't matter because he went and the second was Christian Gonzalez. There were some teams there that needed cornerback. I had honed in on the Giants, on Minnesota, on Jacksonville, and Baltimore, all as teams that could have a yearning. Even Washington have a need for a cornerback like Christian Gonzalez, but nothing materialized. And Will McDonald's a pick, and we'll see, man. Like I said, he brings a skill set that there's nobody on the Jets that has, that can tie in that speed, that bend, and that length all together into one pretty package with a red bow. So, Will McDonald's going to be a good player. I'm confident in that. And let's see how he does on the field. And brings us to second round. There was a plethora of different ways that the Jets could have went with their 1 second round pick. I think as a fan base, I think everyone kind of honed in on the center position, as a big need. I was there as well. I really thought center was going to be the way, but I would have been fine with defensive tackle if there was one of the guys that, that I liked and that they liked that, kind of made sense. I could get away with that. That being said, Mozzie Smith, who was a guy that I did like, he went off earlier than expected, and all no centers went before the Jets were on the clock at 43.
Right.
So Joe Tippmann was the pick. Talk to me about Joe Tippmann. I know you said he's your center 1.
Yeah, Tippmann was a guy. He was my favorite center in the class. I said a few times on our show, I got caught up in all the talk around John Michael Schmitz, and I kind of was at the point where I was like, yeah, he's the top center. But we get recency bias, and there's a million prospects, and sometimes you haven't looked at a guy in a while. And I went back and watched Tippmann a few weeks ago, and I said to Dylan Terham, I was like, I like him better than Michael Schmitz. And it's not that I don't think Michael Schmitz can play. I think they'll both be very good players.
Yep.
I understand the concerns with the height because you don't see a lot of guys with that height succeed at that position. However, you also don't see a lot of guys with that height who can bend and get low as well as he can.
It's exactly what I was just going to say. Like the one thing that I saw in him is he's not a waist bender. He's a knee bender. Yeah. So leverage isn't. I never saw real issues in his game film with leverage. And I also thought that and I love John Michael Schmitz, and I think, like you said, I think he's going to be a great pro. You know, and I would have been content with him as well. But I don't think he moves as well in space as Joe Tippmann does.
And that was my thing. That's what jumped out to me. I think it was last year, late in the draft process when I started looking at this year's prospects, and I'm looking at the prospect list, and he was the top center. So I said, okay, let me go watch some Wisconsin games. And right off the bat, he's pulling and just blowing guys up. And I thought, wow, this is an interesting prospect, because that was my first thought, was that at this height, is he going to be a guy who can play? I've said to a few people, like, it's not until you start watching games, like literally just watching one offensive lineman for every single play, until you do that, you don't realize how often guys pull and don't touch anybody. It happens all the time. Like, guys just pull, and you're like, out in space, nothing, out in space, nothing. And it's just the way the play unfolds. I get it. Wasn't happening a lot with Joe Tippmann. Like, his hit rate, like almost every time he pulled, he was at least getting a piece of somebody, and often just burying guys. Yep. And I'm envisioning this, and I'm thinking, imagine Breece Hall cutting back and running behind that block, like outside zone or a stretch play, and Tippmann just takes a guy off his feet, and Breece Hall cuts back and he's gone. It was a big part of that was fit. Kind of like with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, I spent the whole offseason and much of this year saying Jordan Addison was my receiver one. But then as I think of the fit with the offense, I was like, but for the Jets, I think it would be Smith and Jigba. Same thing with the centers. Like, you can make a case to me that John Michael Schmitz is the better player. But I'm looking at it from a Jets perspective, and I'm thinking outside zones, tosses, sweeps, things like this that they like to run. And this guy killing people on the edge, give me this guy. So, yeah, he's got the size, almost too big, as some people would say. But as we said, he bends well. He anchors well up front. He's good in pass pro. But he's just an absolute monster on the outside game. And the things that I think he's going to be able to, especially now that you've added Izzy Abanikanda. And listen, as I said, my dream scenario is he starts and this draft class is a home run from day one. And I even, it's only been a day, but I have my moments where I'm like, maybe he wins the job. I kind of look at, veteran, like, and solid veteran. McGovern he's not Creed Humphrey, but he's also not Spencer Long. Like, he's a solid player. Whereas, so it's not like you're asking this rookie to come in and beat out a bum. You're asking him to come and beat a solid pro. And that's not as easy as people think it is. I'm not saying it won't happen. I hope like hell that it does, because you want to have better depth on the O-line, and having McGovern who can play center and guard as a proven vet. That's dream scenario stuff.
And he's an affordable. McGovern came back at
crazy for nothing.
1.8 million,
1.8, 1.9, nothing. It was crazy.
So to me, that, I don't know, what kind of conversation do you have with Connor McGovern if you're Joe Douglas? Say, hey, listen, here's what we're going to offer you. We're going to offer you the base minimum, and we're going to draft a guy. We're looking to bring in a pivot here, but we're going to give you a chance to battle it out in camp, and if you win the job, great. And if you don't, you're the first backup between all three interior spots, so we're going to pay you that. Connor McGovern, I've never seen anybody's projected value and real value have such a variance in such a small time, right?
Yeah. I was shocked when I saw the what that deal was for. I think everybody was like, "What's that? That's free. That's basically free." Considering how much room you have to play with, and the fact his experience and what he brings, you're not going to get a better deal than that. And as I said, when they signed him, I was looking at the way everything was unfolding, big picture wise. I thought, okay, well, you signed the guy the same day you traded a second, so maybe that second was earmarked for a center, but now you're not going to get a center. They end up getting a center, which again is great, and I hope the kid wins the starting job. But no matter what happens, you're expecting you're going to have, that's some really solid depth in the middle, which, this team we showed last year, you need to have that depth. You want it. So, like I said, there are some very good takeaways from this draft, and that's one of them is that battle. If the kid wins and you have a backup like McGovern, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Listen, Tippmann, I think, has, Robert Saleh said it's going to be a battle for the job. I think, you know, I'm not going to say Tippmann has a leg up because I don't know. They haven't been on the field yet. But I will say this. There's probably no center. I think Luke Weipler would have been a good schematic fit for us as well. But there's probably no other center that I think I liked the tape and the scheme fit, as much as I did Joe Tippmann. I know, again, people are hung up on the JMS stuff in the sense that, he's the name that everyone talks about.
I was going to say he's the name.
He's the name that everyone talks about. And again, he's going to be a good player.
Yes.
And if JMS was the pick here, I would have been, just as elated as Joe Tippmann. Now, Joe Tippmann, I think, moves better in space. Joe Tippmann's also 2 years younger, and I don't know if that matters, because this year, more than other years in past, Joe Douglas didn't
Older
seem
guys.
to, Joe Douglas went with a couple of 24-year-olds, So, John Michael Schmidt's going to be 25, maybe played into it. I mean, Tippmann's 22, so you get that little difference there. But Joe Tippmann's going to be, he's going to be a mainstay, and the Jets are back to bringing in the solid piece in the middle. Let's hope that he can follow the tradition that we had, even though we didn't draft him, from Kevin Mawai to Nick Mangold to now to John Michael Schmitz. The rotation, the pieces up. If I don't want to ever have to see Dan Feeney starting at center again.
Exactly. I mean, I've literally had these picks just happened, and I literally probably a dozen times today gone back and forth, and I think about it, and I'm like, Tippmann starting. He's winning the job. Yeah. They're going to give him every opportunity to win this job. But then I go, well, you just brought in Aaron Rodgers. If McGovern is even a smidge better, he's starting because you're not going to put Rodgers at risk. But I think Tippmann is going to be given every single opportunity to win this job. And for him to not win it, I think McGovern's going to have to outperform him by a fair bit, which I don't know that that'll happen because, yes, McGovern is the veteran. It really may come down to football IQ that determines the starter because physically, Tippmann's the better player. Tippmann can do more. Tippmann is the guy who can offer more to your scheme. So maybe he wins that job. But I think all it'll take is a couple of mental miscues on protections or something like that, where Aaron Rodgers looks at the coaching staff and says, give me the veteran. This kid's not ready. So I think he'll get every chance. And I can, just as I said, I can see a path to him not playing. There clearly is a path to him playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And obviously, as we move on, we know that we didn't have a third rounder, and I don't know how much they really tried to get back up in the third. If there's anybody that they were there, from the grumblings that I heard that after the Joe Tippmann pick, the rumors were that Saleh and JD said they were done for the night. So I don't know how much work they tried to get back in, knowing that they had an early pick in round 4. So coming into Sunday. There's still a lot of really good talent. Tommy Adebawari was still on the board, and I was the biggest, Adebawari truther. I was pushing it. I really thought he was going to be. I didn't have a true first round grade on him, but I thought he was a first round talent. I didn't have a lot.
Absolutely.
I thought there was nothing more that Adebawari could offer that Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh and crew could look at him and say, okay, there's your athlete, there's your speed, there's everything that we want.
Everything, motor, strength,
inside, outside flexibility. Now, I figured if they wanted him, they would have to trade up for him, but he would have been nice to slide inside with Quinnen Williams, even though he's not a true defensive tackle. I think he could have done it, but
he could have played there.
On top of that, there was also Blake Freeland, who I happen to be a little bit higher on than most. I really liked his athleticism, and I like guys that come in and move well. For a 6'8" guy, the guy moves very, very well.
Yeah.
Offensive lineman. I'm looking at their footwork. Could he bear to get a little bit stronger? Absolutely, he could. A little more functional strength at the point of attack, I thought was going to be something there, but as I'm looking in the 4th round, I'm saying, okay, outside of Tommy Adebawari, if we look towards the tackle, again, like we talked about, I came into this saying Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton are my starters. So a guy who I would say is developmental, or doesn't have to come in and start right away like Blake Freeland. I was loving it. Now Blake Freeland actually went off the board as well, so they pivoted. So let's go ahead and talk about the pick of Carter Warren. Now they actually traded down, if I'm not mistaken, in the 4th round, correct? They did.
I believe so. Yeah, that was the round they moved down in.
Yeah, New England moved up, and who'd they take? Chad Ryan, the kicker.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to make too much fun of that pick because it's going to come back to bite me, and the dude's going to kick a bunch of game winners against the Jets. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm not going to laugh. Like, I kind of laugh, but then I'm like, you know what? Even given the fact that Belichick hasn't been Belichick without Brady, I have a hard time taking him lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, like I said, the kid Carter Warren was a pick. Now I know a lot of people were coming into Sunday. They couldn't believe that DeJuan Jones was on the board. I couldn't believe it either. Until late Saturday, you started hearing some grumblings where he rubbed some teams the wrong way by leaving meetings early or leaving the Pro Bowl, or just they didn't know how much he loved football. On top of that, at 370 pounds, I just didn't see Joe Douglas dipping his toe in that toxic pond again.
Yeah, he was a player I mentioned on our show, and I think put in an article somewhere. I can't remember now, but there's all the draft pods you try to listen to, and I try to get the perspectives of insiders, former GMs, things like that. There's a real good one. I think it's called With the First Pick. It's former NFL linebacker and GM Rick Spielman, and I like it because he can be a little bit ruthless, and he'll kind of stray from the PC stuff sometimes. Whether it's giving his hosts a hard time about their predictions or whatever. But when his name came up, he said, listen, he said, when I was at this guy's pro day, what did he say? He said, I was hearing some really bad things about his eating habits. When the offensive linemen were done working out, Whippler and Paris Johnson went down to the opposite end zone and kept working out with the position coach. He just stood there in his sweatsuit and watched. Then I see him at the combine down in Mobile. He had one good practice and packed it up for the week. He's like, I have too many red flags for that guy. And so when I heard all that, I was like, I'm curious to see if this guy falls now, because if he was seeing this, he's not going to be the only guy who saw it. And he did fall. And I saw some people say, like, oh, he's a steal. He's still there. And I thought, I don't know that he's a steal. And listen, sometimes you get a guy like that. Maybe it is an issue. And maybe falling in the draft is the wake-up call he needs. And he drops 40 pounds before the start of the season. And everyone's saying, why didn't we grab this guy? But in his current state, apparently some teams didn't like what they were seeing.
Yeah. Well, again, for the Jets, now he would have been off the board anyway, unless you're trading up for him. And that wasn't the situation.
Right.
So he's off the board. The Jets trade down with New England. And they hone in on Carter Warren. So talk to me about Carter Warren from Pittsburgh.
Carter Warren, again, I mean, we can sort of just – everyone had a great RAS. We don't have to say that for any pick because Joe Douglas, it seemed to be but great RAS. Run blocking wasn't quite up to par with his pass blocking, but at this point in time, you imagine that the priority for the Jets is going to be protecting the quarterback, and you want a good pass blocker. Don't know that he plays right away. Again, as with Tippmann, I would love to see him win that job, but really good feet, mirrors edge rushers well, does a good job of sliding outside, blocking off those edge rushers who are trying to loop around and get to the quarterback. As I said, the run blocking isn't as good, but he's got the length. Everyone, you hear that as soon as he's drafted, everyone starts talking about the length and the arms, and he's able to keep edge rushers at bay, and he does a really nice job in that aspect of his game. So pass blocking, very good, and will probably only get better. Figure he can be an elite blocker. I think he'll be a starting player one day. It's just a matter of the run blocking getting better. So another guy where I don't dislike the pick at all. I like him quite a bit. You mentioned Blake Freeland, when it started looking like, especially when the Jets moved down from 13 and it looked more apparent that they would miss out on a tackle, that's when I really dove in deep for a few days on the tackles
on the second and third tier. Yeah.
I was watching Jalen Duncan and Freeland and Warren. I came away thinking was the best pass blocker, whereas Freeland was the most athletic. Freeland had the versatility. He played left and right in college, so I thought that he was a guy. I thought the versatility might help his draft stock. And I liked Jalen Duncan was the only guy who worried me because he got smoked a lot in pass pro. But Warren, I thought, was the best pass blocker of the bunch. So again, not as I said, the run blocking not on par with it, so not your most well-rounded guy. I think that would have been Freeland, but can't complain about the Warren pick at all.
Yeah, no, me neither. Like you hit a couple, big points. Again, touches on the Joe Douglas length. I mean, this guy, he can, ooh, sorry about that. His length is tough, and he does such a good job because fundamentally, technically, he's a very sound pass blocker.
Mhm.
So you put that in with the length that this guy and this guy's wingspan, he's just tough to get around. Now, I agree with you. I think that he could get stronger at the point of attack. He doesn't move nearly as well as some of the other guys who, some of the other tackles that went before him. And I know that, the two, you want to call them flags, we can call them flags. The two things is, again, he's another older prospect at 24 years old, and he's coming, he missed the majority of last season with a meniscus tear in his knee. So, we dealt with George Fant those meniscus tears. We know what could happen. So he obviously had to have get a clean bill of health. If he doesn't have some of those if he doesn't have that knee injury, I could easily see him going round 2. I think he's that kind of kid. I like him above this tier. You know what I mean? I think he falls
and,
right
and I
under
think
that.
that's
Right.
I think that's been a lot of the talk. Is that if not for the injury, he would have been a round 2 guy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I love the pick. Like I said, to me, it's a pick that he doesn't have to come in and start. But we see what happens with injuries. We dealt with the tackle injury last year. Again, we're putting a lot of hope and faith in Mekhi Becton, who hasn't seen the field in 2 years. So, getting a guy like this, like Carter Warren, who can come in, I'm curious to see if he can kick over to the right side. Off the top of my head, I don't know what he did in college in regards to alignment through his time at Pitt. But yeah, listen, he's a nice little player. I'm happy. I hope we gave all you guys, a good kind of day 4 overview. Now that we're past the draft and everything kind of settled, I'll overview these guys that join the Jets. And like Glenn said, like we talked about, there seemed to be a theme. There seemed to be athletic freaks that are super long, super strength, and have those traits. Those are the guys that Joe Douglas honed in on here. A lot of guys that are gonna see the field. A lot of guys that might push some starters for their playing time, and some guys that might just see it on special teams, which is okay too, because you have to have those guys on the team as well. I want to thank you, Glenn. I know it's tough. I know you're out in the UK. I know it's probably almost 1 a.m, but I appreciate it, dude. I can chop up and talk ball with you any day of the week. So for me, this was a big pleasure and an honor to have you on my show. So tell everyone again where they can find you, and where they can find all your information, and where they can meet up with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Dom. It's a great time. Love doing it. I don't even know what time it is out here. I've just stopped looking at the clock at this point, but thanks for having me on, and we got to get you on with us again at some point soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, AceFan23 on Twitter at AceFan23, ACEFan23. You can check us out at JetNation.com. Forums are the most active forums, most active Jets forum. You're not going to find an independent Jets site that's more active than we are. Routinely hit 1 million hits a month. And my partner Dylan Terriman at D Terriman on Twitter. We go live Thursday nights at 6:30, and we've recently added Chris Schubert of the Draft Network. He and I have been doing Friday night breakdowns, not just draft. Chris Schubert is a Jets fan, not just a draft guy. So we've been doing our thing Friday nights, and we're going to carry that on. And so Thursday and Friday nights, follow us on YouTube. I throw up videos every now and then if there's breaking news or random thought that occurs to me that I think is worth throwing out there for people to discuss. And yeah, just love covering the Jets, and it drives us a little bit crazy, but we love the team, and that's why we do it.
Yeah. And listen, jetnation.com, guys. Again, if you're not in there, get yourselves in there. Like Glenn said, the forums are really, really active, and you get some knuckleheads, but you get a lot of people that just really, really love the Jets, and you find the knuckleheads anywhere, on
Exactly.
any forum.
My draft review did not go over well today. They were coming for me with the pitchforks, but that's it's all part of it.
Yeah, that's okay. When it comes down to it, everyone's entitled to their opinion,
Absolutely.
and they're entitled to be wrong too. So
yeah, I tell them you can be wrong. I'm not going to tell you
That's
you have to. You don't have to be right. There's no rules.
So listen, Glenn, I appreciate the time again. Glad to have you on. And folks, follow me. You know where to see me. You find me on GreenBean Jetsfan. You can see me on Twitter at DC_NYJets. And until next time, thanks for following us. Thanks for